let's talk about China. So first episode of the night, China could very well replace the auto market, the US auto market. They're already pretty decently positioned to do that. And let's give you some evidence, some factors, and even show you that the US government is actually pretty worried about this. They're putting efforts in to try to make sure that this does not happen. Even the current government, under the Biden administration, I'm sure they would have previously did, really were against the idea of tariffs on China and a trade war. But now they're having to drop down tariffs. They are scared and shaking in their boots. So let's talk about that. Let's cover it right now. Got a little. That is a sexy looking vehicle. That's BYD. That's a Chinese made vehicle in the background. And that's a Ford Ranger. So one of the theories I have is the only thing that might save the US market from not being wiped out by the Chinese market is if we don't go, if gas surmounts those electric vehicles. I think electric vehicle failure, or at least that the numbers stay low on electric vehicles sales, is almost necessary to save the auto industry. So current governments need to start thinking twice about forcing people into electric vehicles by essentially banning gas vehicles, but instead of saying they're illegal, just putting so many taxes on them. So many taxes, not necessarily on the vehicle, because then people would get really upset and see what's going on, but instead they put crazy taxes, they're fines that they give to automakers. But automakers, they don't get seen so much as fines because governments are tricky. They're smart and they love to lie and fool us. What they're actually doing is putting fines on the manufacturers with a choice. Pay us billions and billions of dollars. So here's an example. Let's say Dodge could be offered to pay a $7 billion fine to the government, or give $3.5 billion to Tesla and buy carbon credits. So that, where do they get the money? Dodge, for paying the $3.5 billion to Tesla, well, they get it from being forced to increase prices on their gas vehicles. We've seen it on the gas truck, a Dodge Ram, if it's not the classic model, if it's the new styling, it's always been as expensive as a Ford and a GM, but then there's about always a $10,000 to $18,000 rebate on that Ram. So essentially it was generally $15,000 less than Ford, and about $10,000, $8,000 to $10,000 less than a GMC, and that's how they sold them. But now your traditional Ram customers are going back to switch their Ram, and not necessarily, a lot of them are not buying another Ram. They're like, well, if you're going to be more expensive than Ford, why would I buy a Ram? Then they come shop a GM, a Chevrolet, or a Ford, and often enough from the sales numbers end up buying that GM, Chevrolet, or Ford. We're seeing that. Dodge Ram sales are down. So Ridgeview, thanks for saying hi, to giving a shout out to Winston. And carbon credits are, it's a weird situation because the carbon credits and the fines, or the carbon credit system, is partially killing off, in an indirect way, killing off the US auto industry, because it's bringing up the price of those gas vehicles. And the governments that we've got aren't worried about that, because they say, oh, well, you just need to switch over to electric. But China is destroying us on electric vehicles. They can produce electric vehicles for much less, because guess what? The batteries are made over there, and they're made under essentially slave conditions. When the batteries are mined in Africa, China has a fantastic relationship with many of those African countries. They pay for the infrastructure. They go in, they'll build roads, they'll build hospitals, but then they'll also ensure that they get those batteries produced in slave conditions. It's horrible. We have modern day slavery, and electric vehicle revolution or evolution is more something that requires a revolution, because it's not an evolution, it's a degradation of humanity. People are being enslaved to, essentially, they're in horrible conditions. These mines, you'll have pits with 10,000 people shoulder to shoulder glued together under the ridiculously hot sun, manually digging for these for the various cobalt, lithium, manganese. Anyways, you shouldn't be doing this without proper protection, and it's an issue. But hey, the result is, I'll move my unattractive head to show you this very attractive vehicle. This is a gorgeous vehicle. This is a vehicle that, if it wasn't for the fact that I've got, I call it civic virtue towards my own group, which is the Canada, US, Mexico partnership, trade partnership. I'm going to root for my own team because I like having a society that has some money, and a society that's safer, because money can be, people are being taxed, and those taxes can be used for hopefully a good police force, because that's where taxes should go. It should go towards protecting our land, our liberty, and our health. So you've got a great looking car there. But yeah, this was on Fox Business. This is something that'll be covered from time to time on Bloomberg News. But you've got the fact that, the fact that BYD tops Tesla, that's everywhere. So BYD, Chinese company, has topped Tesla as the world's largest all-electric car producer. And that's a bit of an issue. So remember, Teslas, many of them are made in the United States. Tesla started to slow down on the European production, a little hesitation because sales are down at Tesla. We'll see that in just a moment. So BYD has, it's challenging the European auto industry. It aims to be the market share leader by 2030. So they want to take over, they want to be selling more vehicles than anyone else in Europe. Right now, they're not allowed, I believe, in the States, or at least it looks like the new tariffs on China is 100% on electric vehicles. So 100% tariff on electric vehicles, 25% on EV and non-EV batteries, 50% on solar cells and semiconductors, 25% on steel, aluminum, and ship-to-shore cranes, 25% to 50% on some medical equipment. So current government would have, 5-6 years ago, blasting the previous administration on having a trade war and, these big tariffs with China. But I think their reality is hitting them. It's hitting them 4 or 5 years too late, but they're realizing, oh my goodness, electric vehicles from China could destroy our auto industry, especially if simultaneously you're forcing your auto industry here to switch over to, still produce gas vehicles, but at a much higher price, because there's essentially a huge tax hidden in. They've got to take billions of dollars and then spread them across the price of all the gas vehicles they produce, because the gas vehicles cost them billions of dollars, because it's all about that overall fleet average in fuel economy and miles per gallon. So you don't get there building any gas vehicles. You have to build a whole lot of electric vehicles. And when it comes to cost, Ford, GM, all the American automakers are losing money when building electric vehicles. So, if you care about your neighbor, you care about the overall health and wealth of your society, you need to care about jobs, and you need to care about people having good paying jobs. And here we're talking about hundreds and hundreds of thousands of jobs in the United States that are related to auto manufacturing. And these are good jobs that pay well, that have good conditions, and a great amount of taxes are drawn out from that. And those taxes are used for, schools, the health system, the hospitals, more so in Canada, obviously, when it comes to the hospitals, but the school system in the United States, the roads, the road system, the infrastructure. So the whole infrastructure, a lot of it has to do with these jobs. We don't want to lose these jobs. Look at Britain in the 1980s when they started to lose out all their auto manufacturing. They went through some major issues, economic issues. So China is a threat to U.S. automakers. The current government is responding. They see it as a major threat. When you see 100% tariff, that means they are scared and shaking in their boots. So we'll leave that for later. We're going to be talking about whether it's a good time, bad time to buy, whether prices are going to be going up or down in both new and used. So different information. I've got different conclusions for both based on data. But just to wrap up this story about Chinese vehicles, Chinese vehicles here. Oh, just as a commercial break here, you know, I have to say that I agree with this little meme here. I'm not particularly fond of people who fly in private jets to a meeting where they discuss how to take away my car and feed me bugs. But that's just me. I'm also not fond of, you know, the whole carbon tax system, how it's killing out the US auto industry when it comes to gas-powered vehicles. And when it comes to electric-powered vehicles, well, we're just not very competitive compared to the Chinese market. And when you add Kia and Hyundai, Korean-made vehicles, to the mix, and they're making fantastic electric vehicles right now, when you add that to the mix, we're not in a good position when it comes to electric vehicles. Tesla sales are down by a good portion. And, you know, all of this is because, you know, we're worried about CO2. We've had way more CO2 in the atmosphere. We're at currently 0.04 particulates of CO2 in the atmosphere. If we go down to 0.02 particulates of CO2 in the atmosphere, well, vegetation goes extinct. It all dies off. And we've been, you know, we've been at an incredible amount of more CO2 in the atmosphere. If I recall correctly, I don't have the chart in front of me, but I believe it was 0.9 particulates of CO2 in the atmosphere. So more than 10 times more CO2 has been in the atmosphere before. And the result is you just have bigger, better vegetation. You have bigger trees, bigger tomatoes. Everything when it comes to vegetation is a whole lot bigger. So in 1898, you've got the sea level here on the Statue of Liberty. And now we've got the 2022. Let's look closely here. 1898 sea level, Statue of Liberty, looked a little different. Few more trees, a little more green there. And now you go down to 2 years ago. Looks similar to me. So a huge threat there. You know, Florida should already be underwater, and while the sea level in Florida isn't an issue, and it's not going to be an issue in 50 years either. Otherwise, insurance companies, you wouldn't be able to get insurance for those seaside. Well, Florida as an entire state, because that's pretty much all flat and level, you wouldn't be able to get insurance. And insurance companies aren't stupid. They know what's going on. Let's get to some positive news in just a moment, but there's something to be said about this. A lot of electricity anyways is created by coal plants. And remember, all those solar panels, the wind turbines, all our going green crap is made in China, where there's no one that pollutes more in the world for a geographical, artificially constructed area. But the political area, the land mass that we call China, no one's polluting worse than them. And for some reason, you know, we have laws set up so that, you know, in Canada, we're not building wind turbines and solar, where we could actually be building those things in a very clean manner, extremely clean compared to how it gets built in China under horrible humanitarian conditions. So I think we're being very much distracted. There's always other options that aren't really being allowed, such as synthetic gas doesn't count as, even though synthetic gas is essentially made from taking carbon out of the atmosphere. You use carbon in the atmosphere, you take it out, you process it. It's a very clean way of making fuel, and then you take carbon out, and then yes, you burn that, you know, synthetic fuel, which then releases carbon back, but it's a net zero situation. The vehicle still counts as being a huge polluter and gets these tariffs. But there's diesel engines have successfully been converted to run on 90% hydrogen. I think that's where we need to go. Hydrogen would be, I think, the way to go. Convert some diesel engines to run on 90% hydrogen. I've got a friend, if he allows me in the next episode, I'll mention or I'll tag at some point the name of his channel, but he's manually with one other friend has converted, I think it's a Chevrolet, it's a Dodge, Chevrolet or a Dodge Ram. They've converted it to run mostly on hydrogen. So it starts off on diesel and then switches to hydrogen. So get you more news on that, so you check out his channel. We will talk about Bronco used prices. That's something worth talking about. But we do definitely live in a system that's not always honest and isn't always clean, we'll say. So there's your Boeing Employee of the Year. So another little commercial break to praise the Boeing Employee of the Year. Hopefully you recognize who that is and you kind of get the connection right there. You can talk about that in the comments. Drop in the comments who you think that is and what that meme is about, so that people that don't quite catch it do get it. And another commercial break from our friends over at Boeing. You got Snitches Get Stitches from William E. Boeing. Thank you very much, sir. It seems that over at Boeing, snitches do get stitches because, well, the two whistleblowers have somehow mysteriously ceased to exist. They've disappeared in a permanent manner. Certain words you can't use on YouTube, so gotta play it safe. But there's something to be said. Gasoline engines, I don't know why we would, if you love battery electric vehicles, I loved my Lightning. Nothing against it. Thought it was amazing. So much fun. But it does remain the fact that you got, a battery pack costing about 27,000 US dollars for a 91 kilowatt battery pack. And you get for 17,000, 1,000 horsepower. So back to the real topic here. You've got one or two more slides about the China dilemma I want to cover. Tesla sales are down in Q1 of 2024, considerably down, but overall sales in the US of electric vehicles are up 3.8%. So that's kind of scary. While electric sales have gone up 3.8% for the first 4 months of the year, the first 3 months of the year, 4 quarters, of course, 3 times 4. So for the first 3 months of the year, up until the end of so the first quarter of the year, up 3.8% for overall electric sales, but down 12% for Tesla. This isn't looking great. BYD overtaking Tesla sales. So yeah, the main concern is China could definitely replace the US auto industry if the governments continue to force the US auto industry to switch to electric or extremely expensive gasoline vehicles because they're filled with taxation so that the middle class can no longer afford gasoline powered vehicles, and it's only for, the rich, the 1% of society, so only 1 out of 100 vehicles being sold, 1% of vehicles being sold as gas, because they could potentially still double in price because of these tariffs. These taxes, not the taxes. China is being tariffed, a definite sign that there's an issue. But we need to buy American. If you care about the health and wealth of your society, buy American. Ignore memes like this that show Elon Musk saying ew to an internal combustion, but then being like, yeah, right on for the external combustion. And we like to meme and joke around about Teslas catching fire, but at the end of the day, I think we need to all focus on accepting those American-made electric vehicles and say, you know what, we're all in this together. Vehicles made from China, they're the real threat. Vehicles made in Korea, they are also a threat. They could help wipe out US auto production. And let's try to get along as an overall USD auto enthusiast community. Invite those Teslas into our car groups, into our conversations. Stop constantly, making people feel horrible if they buy a Tesla and then think, well, maybe people won't look at me crooked based on all the memes I see on the internet and all the slack and crap that Tesla gets. I better go buy a BYD. It won't stick out as much. So we need to kind of put that aside and just all be one group here, one group and one community. But at the end of the day, we also have to follow the evidence and also look at the history. Some scientific data or scientific proof and evidences get presented as such when in reality they're just presenting us a version of history. Because look at the science. In the 1960s, they said that the oil supply would be gone in 10 years. So right up here, 1960s, oil supply gone in 10 years. In the 1970s, because of, combustion engines and whatnot, and whatever their agenda was to putting more taxes on us. They need to tax us more because, well, there's an ice age coming in 10 years. So followed a certain agenda in a certain direction. Then in the 1980s, it was, I remember this, acid rain was going to kill the soil in 10 years. That never happened either. In the 1990s, the ozone, I remember this extremely well, the ozone layer will be gone in 10 years. Also didn't happen. Bunch of partially bull crap. It is good that we adjusted what we put in our aerosols. 2000s, global warming will kill us all in 10 years. Also didn't happen. 2010s, climate change will kill us all in 10 years. More and reason for more taxes. That was the only end result of all of that. And now it's that carbon is going to create human extinction when the planet's actually gotten greener from this carbon increase. So we're not on the end of an apocalypse. We need to relax. Take a nice Sunday drive with your family. Continue to have families. The system, certain groups in the system will hate you for having a family and will use all forms of media to discourage you from ever having a family. But you know what? So far I can tell you it's the greatest joy. It's the thing that has brought me the greatest joy, even more than Winston, which you saw at the beginning of the live, but even more than Winston, which I didn't do this to my dog. This is a male dog. I would not do this. Maggie had a little fun, but there's Layla, there's Winston. Having a family has been the best thing. It's the greatest thing that I think I'll ever achieve in my life. It's brought me the most joy, the most pride, and the most reason to, give it my best. Put in the biggest effort and work hard. And thankfully, I work and live in a system that if you work harder, you get paid more. There's actual reasons to be motivated and to work harder. It's not the communist system where you're like, well, you know what? I'll be fed and dressed whether I go out and do tractor that field all day, or I can just deliberately break the tractor and sit in the shade underneath it and relax and do nothing all day. Well, the communist system wasn't very efficient when it comes to motivating people to do work. Not efficient at all. So switching over to, that's the end of, will China replace the USD auto market? Yes, they will. If we don't do something about it on an individual level, we need to buy US made vehicles, not Kias and Hyundais, not Korean made vehicles, but ideally US made vehicles. And yes, sometimes you can go to a Toyota and not have a societal harm if there's a Toyota factory that actually employs people. And maybe you should consider about not buying a Ram if they shut down the factories pretty much deliberately, because it looks like they're setting themselves up for failure so that they have an excuse to bring more production overseas, maybe even to China, but already a lot of truck production has gone to Mexico. So let's keep an eye on that, and let's have this we get to vote. Voting nowadays doesn't have nearly as much of an impact as when you buy stuff. When you buy stuff, that's really when you're voting. So we all have a great power collectively, and that one of those great powers can be exercised through what we purchase, because that'll influence what they make, how they make it. If we say we don't want Chinese batteries because, enslavement, humanitarian reasons, and F China, well then you need to buy American. Vote with your dollars, folks. That's the end of that episode. Thank you so much for following through. Whether you agree with me or not, that's okay. Let's not hate each other because of our opinions. Opinions are based on the data that we've collected. And as humans, it's only natural to create a conclusion and an opinion from the data we've gone over. Now, if you have different data than me, I don't believe in censoring your data because I don't like it or it hurts my feelings. I don't think you should be canceled because you have a different opinion than me. I think it's good and healthy if you have a different opinion, especially and ideally if you know why you have a different opinion.